judgment of behavior by a member of parliament, which was deemed by the whole society to be egregious in its assault on another Jamaican. It made it not subject because there was no person bringing a charge. But
there's no evidence.
no, but there was a lot of evidence on the television played out. Yes. And it may not be evidence in a court of law, but certainly in the realm of the Jamaican people having a feeling of whether such a person was fit to represent them in the parliament is something that they could determine was the case. You know, and I keep making the point that breaches, it's a political process, as they say in the United States, impeachment. And it is a political process that would be envisaged, though not necessarily carried out by politicians. The fact of the matter is that there are actions that can result, that can be of benefit to the body politic, as may be the case with Boris Johnson's resignation. He can run again, but he took the decision as a version of impeachment. He took the decision to resign. What the sanction applied would have required is that he be suspended and a by-election could be held in which he could run again. And people could elect him again, but it would constitute, nevertheless, a sanction of sorts.
Yes.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes, Mr. Williams?
It is a comment. I am happy to hear Dr. Peter Phillips speak about proportional representation. It's dear to my heart because Jamaica has shut out third parties for a very long time. And certainly two parties alone. I don't want to go into the history of how the JLP was formed as an amalgamation of many different groups. As was the PNP. What we have here now is a situation where our constitutional arrangement make it very difficult for third parties to survive. And I would want...
Sorry, why do you say our constitutional arrangement? Why? The NDM was around, it got some support, and it petered out. The Constitution didn't prevent it.
If we had proportional representation,
They would have been in parliament.
they would have at least one member in the House, one of the houses. What we need is to end majoritarianism and look at proportional representation, not just in the upper house, but also in the lower house. And I want Dr. Phillips to speak as to why they would never consider proportional representation for the lower house.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that because he says it's in the 1995 Joint Select Committee, which, as I understand, the terms of reference of the current Constitutional Reform Committee is to look at what is in the 95 document, to assess the gaps that now exist as a result of the passage of time, and to update it. So we have a member of the committee now, perhaps he wants to give a comment on that, as well as any other comment. Good to see you, Mr. Hugh Small.
Sorry?
Yes, go ahead.
I originated a position I came into this. But the question of proportional representation, it is deeply, and I'm not using this in a legal phrase now, it's deeply entrenched in our Constitution by defining representation in the House of Representatives in terms of constituencies. Now, it is a part of our culture that people want to know. I can go to my MP and hold accountable, or her accountable, on the basis of what I perceive to be my local interests. That is something that has to be taken into account. We started a little bit about it within the Constitutional Committee, and Dr. Barnett, whose approach to constitutional reform is extremely practical, spoke to the difficulties that exist in some jurisdictions where they have proportional representation in being able to form governments and have state government. However, if you look at the statistics, at the last election, less than 38% of the persons registered to vote voted. And I have a chart here, which I got from the Electoral Commission's website, that shows that the numbers are going down and down and down. A lot of people are not going to vote because they say it does not represent a real choice. But once you divide it, and we have to find a solution to it, not only with respect to the Senate, but in respect to the people who vote on election day. Because people don't vote for senators. But many people, there are many elections, I can tell you, I didn't vote. And in my time, I voted for at least 3 different parties. But there were several times when I did not vote because there was no choice. A lot of people feel that way, but that comes down to the definition of choice on a constituency basis. If we are prepared to look at it for the Senate, we better think about why the percentage is going down so far. The last time it was less than 38%. My fear is that in the referendum, it's going to be lower.
My only comment was that my comments were restricted to looking at the Senate. But for all of those reasons, which is that there was the difficulty of forming governments is seen particularly, well, most spectacularly recently in Israel, where they have the problem with proportional representation, leads to a lot of instability. The strength is that it allows consensus building and it allows minor voices to be heard. But it can paralyze government. And we have to deal with it. But, I think we need to, the factors behind, we need to have a close examination as a country as to the factors leading to the low participation rates. Lots of factors, I think, involved in this, not least being the fact that we have had a long period of economic stagnation in the country, 50 years of it, which has meant that people's lives practically have not improved. And there is this sense. In addition, there are other issues of accountability, commonality of policy, as Ms. Small is suggesting, and lack of effective choice, etc. But it's something to examine, and without doubt, the continued trend downwards is not healthy.
Thank you. King's Counsel Walter Scott, you have a thought you wish to share on anything here? Any other? Yeah, no? Pretty personally come. Mr. Robinson, is there anything you wish to share? No? Any other, Dr. Barnett? Any other member? Mr. Saunders?
I wanted to hear from Mr. Robinson.
Youth of Malice? Mr. Saunders?
One final comment I would make, and that is that, and I think I was getting to inferring it, says that constitutional creation and change is very difficult for the reasons that I was trying to explain about the need for consensus and so on, so that you can have attractive ideas. But two things have to be considered in making consideration. Whether that attractive idea is going to get the necessary consensus, one, and two, whether it is attractive on paper, but may cause difficulty in practical implementation. And in the rustle and bustle of political activity, a lot of things which on paper look like it will work, it's not going to work. And therefore you have to be very careful how theoretic you are about what you perceive in consequence of the report.
Especially in social media era. Mr. Saunders?
Thank you. Yes, so it's Maurice Saunders. I have a dream. And it goes like this. What do you think, and this is addressed to both Doctors Barnett and Phillips, what do you think of a president obviously in place of the Governor General with a role and with powers similar to what the Governor General presently has, but with something more? Yes, I agree that we have been experiencing and growing over the past number of years, feeling our way through the present system. But one of the things that ought to be clear to all of us coming out of this talk again about constitutional reform is that often the people feel unrepresented. We know that there are times when whoever forms government not really talking for the people. There are times when the opposition also seems to miss and they're not talking for the people. And both sides not really representing the people. In fact, something happened recently which seemed to suggest that. And in relation to that same something, when we think back over time, sometimes there are issues in relation to which a timeout needs to be called. And we need time to think of the decision to be made. Sometimes judges need time to sit down and go through the details of the evidence to come to a decision and make a judgment. So also there are times when a society needs to think through something. Maybe what happened recently was well thought through and orchestrated. Maybe not, maybe it was just an accident. But I pick that one as an example in which perhaps you could have a Governor General with power to say, look, wait, no, something is wrong. Obviously, a Governor General who would be elected also, I forgot to say that. President. Elected by the people, for the people. President. Essentially, the Governor General will be the conscience of the Constitution and of the people. Especially when those who govern and the opposition are not reading the people right. People could petition the president now to say, look, we have problems. We would like you to intervene. We'd like you to delay, perhaps for a 3-month period, the details we need to be worked out. Initially a 3-month period. And look at this whole salary thing. Don't pay yet. Delay for 3 months. Let us talk about it some more. Send something over to Gordon House for them to discuss it more. And perhaps with further power, delay for a further 2 or 3 months. But with those kinds of little additions to what the president have. Yes, it's costly, but we have already invested in it. There's King's House, there's a Governor General, there are the trappings of the office. So add a little bit more to that budget. But a little more power, he's going to need legal advice, he's going to need something in his budget to pay for additional expertise and additional help. But most of all, it really is an office in which it's another way of representing, speaking for the people. It wouldn't do away with what is done now, the joint state committees and having public persons come and speak to the Senate committees, but it would be another avenue to represent the people. Thank you. What do you think about that?
Dr. Barnett, your answer first.
We'd have to define exactly what are these additional things to see whether those are things which should be given to the former head of state or to a more democratic elected person or body, or whether that person has the competence to deal with those particular matters. You know, as I said, the number of ideas and options and thoughts you can have in relation to a constitution, which is a general system, is infinite. So that I'm sure I can bring up tomorrow morning with another 10 ideas. But the question is how practical it is, how much consensus you can get in support of it, and how can I ensure that it's going to work. And it won't cause more problems than I can intend to solve.
Dr. Phillips, you have a comment on this, and then Gordon Robbins will have a comment, and I'll take one final one from there, and we really have to wrap. Dr. Phillips.
Well, you know, I understand Mr. Saunders' desire for what we call something more. But essentially, were you to introduce an elected element to the general electorate for this post, you are opening up a whole other constitutional structure and order that would flow, that would make it impractical. I think the other comment I would make in relation to that is that we mustn't, I think there's a lot that takes place. And conventions are important. And there's a lot of dialogue that already takes place. I think governors general have had and continue to have, as far as I know, regular meetings with prime ministers and leaders of the opposition and exchange views such as there are. It's an entirely different question to provide for legislative power or an executive power beyond that what exists for him to interfere to interfere with the powers of the elected persons who have been given the power by the electorate. And the electorate already has recourse if they don't like what has happened. And they have that recourse at the time when another ballot is held.
Gordon Robinson.
You keep saying that, but Emily, you know me very well. And you know that I am the terrible tout.
The terrible child.
No. I'm only speaking because the great Dr. Barnett has asked me to speak. So I'm going to deal with his mantra, which appears to be, because it is too difficult, we should not try. And I think the world is grateful that that was not the position taken by either Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King. I believe that if we know that we need fundamental change, that we must try for fundamental change. If it fails, it fails. But our obligation is to try. Now I've heard from both gentlemen tonight a lot about agreement between Siaga and Manley, Siaga and Golding, the two political parties. And the only thing I have not heard tonight about what is the role of we, the people. And I need to know how we, the people, are going to get involved.
And if we don't hear how we are going to get involved, we are not going to vote in this system where our vote means nothing. And this is why what you is saying is true, that the voter apathy is going down every year and it's going to keep coming down. And do you know why? Because we are asked to vote for an MP once every 5 years, and then for the next 5 years, nobody says boo to us. So I'm asking the panelists, how are we going to adjust this constitution to make sure that we, the people, are consulted more frequently?
Well, I will say that my MP has a very good WhatsApp group. Consultations on whatever it is that is posted, we get immediate response. And I would encourage you to petition your MPs as a start to that, not taking away from your point here at the town. But then the other thing is, in this constitutional reform, how exactly should the members of the committee hear from the 2.7 million people in Jamaica, those who are adults, and sort of at what point in time, what do they take on? I've never quite understood it, particularly when, as Dr. Barnett said, we have to be very practical about what we're doing. And one of the things we have agreed on is we need to move away from the monarchy. To move away from the monarchy, you need a bill laid in Parliament. The bill has to pass 2/3 of the lower house, 2/3 of the Senate, and then it goes to the people for a majority vote. I don't know why we need to have further consultation on that particular aspect, since we all agree that we need to do that. But join me tomorrow on the hotline.
With the greatest respect, we can always do that.
Yes.
That is something we can always do.
What terrible told?
What you just said.
Which is what?
Move away from the monarchy by getting rid of King Charles,
yes,
and adjusting the order in council and passing a Jamaica. We can always do that.
No, we have to, the very document, the Constitution has set out how that has to be done. Meaning, a bill has to be laid in the Parliament, it has to be laid there for X number of months, and then 2/3 of each house has to vote. So
yes, we can always do that, Emily.
Yes.
The issue is that all we want to do?
No, no, I agree with you.
No, this is what else can we agree to.
Which is where the consultation comes in, terrible tones. I completely agree, but what I fear, when you said 20 years ago, you said we'd have King Charles III. We are there now. And I believe we're going to end up with William, the pace at which we're going, and then Charlotte, and then the other two kids of William, if we don't get a move on and be systematic about this particular phase of the reform.
And when we remove Charles, when we adjust the order in council and get rid of it and pass our own Jamaican document in exactly the same terms as the British one, how better off will we be?
Remember Dr. Phillips said,
rid ourselves of the garbage of monarchy. That is what we have done. To me, that is important.
And we will have moved from that to what Dr. Phillips properly called a dictatorship by Prime Minister.
So whatever we have now, call it dictatorship or not, moving away from the monarchical form to a republican form, to me is an important advance. Moving from an ordering council to a Jamaican instrument, to me is an important advance. As a Jamaican, I would have pride in knowing that we have achieved those two things. There are other things which you may wish to have, and I'm in agreement if you can get consensus on those other things. But we have waited for 60 years. I have, most of you haven't. And we haven't got that. And we can wait another 60 years because I kept on pointing out that we are at the same place we were 60 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, or even 30 years ago, and we are not even making the first step that we all agree now, seem to agree, should have been made.
Well,
So that if we are going to do all sorts of things to prevent those steps from being taken, because we contemplate the possibility of other things, then the whole thing is defeated.
final comment, sir. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Chin. I'm getting into my second year at KML. I'm also the Education and Voting Chair for the KML Law Society. And my question is directed to both panelists, and it is centered under the theme of participation. And also, we're looking at how can we protect and or ensure a greater degree of participation with respect to our indigenous groups, and also protecting and or ensuring the participation of our religious groups, particularly the collective body of the church. So that those two primary groups would be a point of interest with respect to how we can ensure greater participation and inclusion in the group. Thank you.
Well, you've got two members on the Constitutional Reform Committee, don't you? Two members of the church minister who are part of the team looking at the reform now. So I let Dr. Barnett, how can we protect religious institutions and religious groups and to ensure their